Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Mind Muscle Connection podcast. Today is a solo episode, and I have a topic I want to dive into. It's around my training and just stress in general and how we need to adjust. And I just want to give you a practical application of what I've done in terms of how I do this for myself, but then also with clients. But first, before I dive into that, if you haven't yet, make sure you download my free body recomp checklist. So it will go over 10 things you need for body recomp, what a body recomp is, the two types of body recomp, why it's important to focus on body composition. So make sure you go and grab that and check it out. So with that out of the way, let's dive into today's topic. And this is going to be around training stress, life stress, how we need to adjust what we're doing, right? I've done a couple episodes on this in the last couple months. So first, if you check out episode 621, I have high resting heart rate, low HRV, stress load high, how to adjust training and nutrition to match that. So make sure you check that out. And then if you just want to learn a little bit more about overall stress load on the body, what are some hidden things that cause stress on the body that, most people don't think about and what we need to do about it, make sure you go check out episode 88 there. And then if you want to get my 3-step framework or learn more about it, just shoot me a message and I'll shoot you over some education I've done on that there. So with that out of the way, so my update on me. So the last couple of weeks, stress overall has been high on the body. As of right now, it's August 22nd. This will be out August 29th. So about the last 3 to 4 weeks, and we'll go back the last couple months and maybe even the last year in terms of what I've had going on. But just in the short term, so a few things there. What got sick. Now, did I get sick because of the stress load on the body was higher and I was just predisposed? I just was more likely to catch whatever. Over the last couple of years, I've done pretty good at avoiding being sick. I've had a few colds here and there, but I'm typically in the past been a 2 to 3 cold person like per season, like per year, maybe a few more. Probably partly because of the gym, but also this over the last couple of years, I've really tried to hone in on recovery, pay attention to it even more, and also be strategic with my supplementation around being sick, right? Or just certain things, right? So like NAC is super helpful when I do get sick. I've been taking NAC, but then also I take it regularly. But then when I get sick, I take NAC, lozenges, extra vitamin C, obviously take my multivitamin, take vitamin D, take melatonin to help with my circadian rhythm and help me get good quality sleep, staying hydrated. And that seems to help, right? With the zinc, especially if once you feel any sort of sign of sickness, you start taking these things and it can be super helpful to reduce the duration and how bad it is. This time around, I was a little late in terms of starting it, but I also just feel like when I talk about everything else that's gone on over the last little bit, how this will all start to make sense. I did get sick again, was that because of higher stress load on my body right now. And so again, when we traveled a couple weeks ago, I ended up getting something when we traveled, came back. It was a cold, still experiencing a little bit actually. So that's the other kind of interesting thing here is it's lingered on just a little bit longer than I don't feel necessarily sick anymore, but like congestion, you can hear it in my nose, things like that. Resting heart rate has continued to stay a little bit higher than I would like it to be. Again, just a sign that I'm a little bit under recovered. I did get sick. And again, was that because of the high stress load but really, again, that's a stressor on the body, right? Anytime you get sick, that is a stressor on the body. And again, it could have been a bunch of other things going on that also made me more predisposed to getting sick. For the last 3 weekends, I've done some form of traveling, nothing major, like no flights or anything like that. But 3 weeks ago, had our father-son golf tournament. So it was an hour away. It wasn't very far. Friday, did a little bit more drinking, obviously stayed out of town, not my normal sleep patterns there, normal sleep environment there. So had that. Then the following week we left on Thursday and we went down to the lake, which is about 3.5 hours away. Again, same thing, right? A little bit more drinking than normal, out of my normal sleep environment, normal, just general stress, like travel stress, which again, this wasn't a major travel. And then last weekend, we also went to her friend's lake, which was about 2 hours away, spent the day out there, again, did a little bit of drinking. So the last 3 weeks have involved a little bit more drinking in general, a little bit more travel, a little bit less quality food in those 3 weeks as well, too. That's been a little bit off. And then there's that, right? Again, that is a stressor on the body as much as it's a good thing to go and do those things. It is a stressor on the body. Stress in general has just been high. From a business perspective, I'm the sole provider of our family right now. And so Allie takes great care of our son. We don't want to put him in daycare, so she doesn't work very often. The financial burden is on me and making sure that I manage those things. That's weighing on my mind at all times. And then just again, from a professional standpoint, just a little bit more stress than normal from that perspective. I feel like I have a lot on my plate. There's a lot going on. And then you combine it with everything else. At this point, we're a year into having our son. There is still some stress and like change to that generally. So stress is a bit higher right now overall. The last week or so, I've been going to bed a little bit later and I've been doing some work later in the day, like doing some things. And I just have found that I haven't gotten into a good wind down routine like I typically do in the evening there. And I've just been going to bed closer to 11 and I would like to start to settle down between 10 and 10:30. So a little bit later from that perspective. So I feel like sleep has been a little bit lower. Then on top of all the other things, travel, stress, like that is impacted a little bit. I was fat loss dieting. I'm actually back in it now, but I was previously before all these events came up, and I took a couple weeks of a diet break there. But a calorie deficit is a stressor on the body, right? You're not getting as much fuel as you typically do. Your body is adapting to that. And so again, that is a stressor on the body. It's another thing that we can check off of, okay, that's going to put you at a little bit higher risk of getting sick or recovery being a little bit lower in general. But I did offset that by taking a diet break during these last couple of weeks. I didn't try and diet straight through. So I do feel like that helped me a little bit. I'm a little bit leaner and I was actively fat loss dieting. So again, another stressor on the body. I also have a pretty high caffeine intake. Is it a big deal? Maybe not, but I do think it impacts things a little bit, right? I'm sure my sleep could be a little bit better if I dial back on overall caffeine intake. Caffeine is going to increase your heart rate. It's going to increase anxiety a little bit, and it's just going to generally make you a little bit more wired. And so from an overall recovery standpoint, probably not the greatest thing. I do feel like I work out usually between the hours of 3 and 6 p.m. I work during the day, and during that, I'm usually sipping on coffee till about between 12 and 2 p.m., right? And I do feel like I have that going on, like to where it's like that your body's kind of in that state, and I'm not necessarily moving around during that time, right? It's more mental side from my work, from a work standpoint, but it's not, I'm actively moving. So I feel like the caffeine is not necessarily as needed or as effective if you take caffeine and then move around. So it's by the time I've had caffeine in my system for a while, then I go and train. I don't think it's positive to my training. That's basically what I'm getting at there with that. And then again, just the mental fatigue, right? And that comes back to stress being high, client load, trying to make content, figure out what content, making sure that I continue to get clients, bring clients in, right? These are things that, again, mentally, it weighs a lot on you. And then again, as much as I love working with clients and everything like that, it's you, a lot of times there's a lot of positive things that happen, but there's also a lot of stress. There's a lot of things that you're taking care of in terms of from the mental side of things. And sometimes you do take that on a little bit, right? Obviously, working with people virtually, it's a little bit different than in person, where I feel like you really take on their energy during that time. But again, most of the time, people are going to come with their problems, which is fine. But again, that is something that can weigh on you mentally as well, too. So again, all these things just lead it to just a little bit more stress load on my body than normal. And then obviously just having a kid in general. So this comes back to a year ago. Sleep patterns are much better now. When you have a child, again, that's another person you need to support. That's when you're with them, you need to make sure that you're constantly watching them, especially around 1 year old. So I found that it's a little bit harder to get a little bit more just clear time, like where I'm not either trying to learn something new, do client work, focus on what I'm going to do next, watching Colby, right? It's just been a little bit tougher to get that downtime to where I can just clear my head a little bit more often. And some people I feel like need more, some people need less with that. I feel like I definitely need a little bit more than some people, where some people can get away with not much at all there. And again, that will add to just your mental fatigue and mental load. And it's again lacking that recovery from instead of a physical standpoint, more of a mental standpoint, just like we need that as well too. So this kind of brings me into training this week. And then what I'm going to do is I talk about training, and then I also am going to talk about some things that I do well, though I feel like, to manage this. Because again, at the end of the day, okay, so these are all things that we're all going to experience, right? Anyone over 30 is going to experience this. So you're going to have to do some travel. You're going to get sick from your kids. Stress is going to be high from work responsibilities, family responsibilities, life responsibilities. Sometimes it can be hard to get into bed on time. You may be trying to change your body composition and pushing that and changing that again, or something along those lines. Maybe we mask all this with a high caffeine intake. So I think this is something that a lot of people, in their 30s plus have to deal with. And unfortunately, we can't just like in our 20s, we could probably just get away with it. One, we didn't have as a lot of this, but even if we did, we probably would be able to get away with it a little bit easier because our bodies are just naturally more resilient. And then obviously as we get in 30s and beyond, that can slow down a little bit. So last night I was training, I had my cardio session. It was going to be a kind of zone 3-ish medium intensity cardio session where I wanted to keep my pace for my 25-minute pace at what it's been at recently, right? Again, training's been a little off the last couple of weeks there. And again, I'll talk about what I've done to manage training over the last couple of weeks, but I haven't been able to be as consistent with cardio over the last 2 to 3 weeks. There's been a few missed sessions, and then obviously getting sick last week, I had to manage that, which I'll talk about there with that. So again, had my cardio session. I wanted to do 25 minutes at my pace that I've been able to do that at recently. And then I wanted to add another maybe 10 to 15 minutes of a little bit lower of a pace just to get a little bit more volume in general up. about 5 minutes into my pace, I could tell I was like, man, my heart rate was a lot higher than it typically is. I just felt more tired. My legs felt tired. And I basically knew I was like, man, there's no way I'm going to be able to maintain this pace. So I actually went a little bit lower the pace, like a lot sooner than I wanted. And I just was not able to maintain it. Instead of spending 20 to 25 minutes there, I was going to do it based off of how I felt. If I felt good, I was going to push 25 minutes at that pace. If I felt okay, I was going to just go to 20. But I couldn't even get to 20. I really didn't even get to 15. The speed that I was at is typically 16. I had to drop it down to 15 about halfway through. It was like maybe around 12, 10 to 12 minutes in there, right? And again, the output was down, not massive, but it was down. It was really hard to do it. And again, heart rate just went super high. Again, that's just a sign that I'm just under recovered at that standpoint. So I stopped the pace at what I did there. And then I also just stopped overall at 25 minutes. I was just like, this is just one of those decisions you have to make to where it's, do I just keep going and push through, even though my output's down, resting heart rate's super high? And my thought on it was, I'm just going to be adding fatigue for not a lot of actual adaptation. So it was like, for me, it's like, I'm done. Like, this is it. I felt guilty about it. I was like, man, you could just keep going for another 5 to 10 minutes. But I was like, what's the point? There's no point to continue to do this. I'm way off pace. I got in what I needed to do. I did the job for today. Basically call it a day and then save it for another day. And again, that can be hard to do. Like for me, I have that mental battle. Oh, I should have just kept pushing more. But again, I just felt like from a recovery standpoint, I just would have dug myself into a little bit of a deeper hole. I'm also not like recovering as quickly from the sickness as I wanted to. So it's again another sign that it's like, hey, just back off. But again, I definitely felt guilty about it. And so that's how one way you can manage it there. And that was just last night, even though I felt like I was back, but it was the sickness, but then also everything else, right? I'd been going to bed a little bit later the last couple nights, so I'm a little bit under recovered there. Stress has been, even though the baseline of stress has been higher the last couple months, last year, it's been even higher the last couple weeks. And then all these things, just probably a little bit under recovered from not having a weekend at home over the last 3 weekends. I've been busy. That's usually my time to recuperate and things like that. Get a little bit more sleep, just recover, kind of get that downtime that I was talking about. Haven't really had that, which I need there. And so I was like, you know what? No need to push it. Let's just end it there with that. So that's what I did last night. And again, that's just a way that we can do it because I just see a lot of people try and push through, and then it's now your output's super low. So you feel like you're working super hard. You're not actually getting any sort of cardiovascular adaptation, fitness adaptation. And this goes for lifting too. But you're just digging yourself into a deeper recovery hole. And so now you just feel, and then you're never able to actually really perform well. Like you might feel like you're pushing yourself hard but you're not going to your max or you're not pushing yourself as hard as you could, as regularly as you can, because you're just trying to push through. You have a lot of life stress going on. You have a high stress load on the body. And so our goal needs to be get in what we can. And then now from there, it's like we need to work on lowering stress load on the body there. Some other examples of what I've done recently over the last couple of weeks in terms of my training with the travel and also being sick. Fit on average right now I'm doing 3 weight training sessions per week. The last 2 3 weeks, it's been about two per week. I think maybe I got 3 in. I can't remember for sure. I have to look on that, but it's been about 2 on there. And I also just have dropped the intensity in those. Like I was luckily in the transition of going into a new training cycle and taking over my own training. And so it was a little bit easier, but I've definitely lowered intensity a little bit from what I was doing, right? Some of the exercises I've kept in definitely been a little bit lower in terms of weight and pushing as close to failure. So I'd say on average, I've increased my RIR a little bit there. When I was sick last week, instead of doing my high intensity cardio, I backed off, right? I just did some walking for a couple days, just got some light movement in and pushed those back and pushed everything back a few days there. So I think I pushed cardio back, dropped the intensity of my weight training, and just did less frequency, less workouts overall the last couple of weeks. So that's a way I've managed that from that perspective. Other things that I feel like I'm doing and it helped me with having a little bit of a higher stress load than what I'm used to on my body is one, lifting volume is low for me. And I think it's relatively low in general. I would say I'm probably closer to 6 to 8 sets per muscle group right now. I'm doing 3 full body days. In the past, we're talking 2 years ago when I was like, I want to build as much muscle as possible. And I still do want to continue to try and build what I can. I was doing probably 6 days a week of training, probably closer to 15 to 20 sets per muscle group, right? So like volume's definitely down a lot. Now, I will say I'm sure I'm getting closer to failure more often because I'm doing less volume. So there is that. But my lifting volume is low, right? I'm not doing a bunch of intensity techniques. I'm just doing straight sets. I'm not doing high rep training. I've taken out, Brian had me do he would add in like rest pause sets, like length and partials and stuff. And even before this happened and during when I started my fat loss phase, I was like, hey, I want to take these out. I just felt a little beat up from weight training. Again, those are great techniques, but they also do add fatigue. And so I wanted to take a break from that. So I'm just doing straight sets. I'm spending most of my time in the 6 to 10 rep range. I would say 5 to 10 rep range. I'm not going too high on reps either because those generally are a little bit more fatiguing. Not just training super lengthened anymore, like I'm doing a combination of those, right? So I'm not just training in the lengthened range of motion all the time there. And then again, just generally volumes a little bit lower with that. And this has been like something that's been going on again in the last year because I have noticed my recovery is lower than what it used to be. I'm like, when I go and weight train, I couldn't imagine doing what I was doing before at this point, right? I just feel like recovery is lower from a mental and a physical standpoint. And so there's a lot of mental fatigue as well too, and motivation too. And this is when it comes to lifting in general, like I'm just not as motivated to like train as much from a weight training perspective. I don't know if it's the home gym. I don't know if it's just I have other goals now where I really want to focus on the cardiovascular fitness. And then again, I have other things from like a business standpoint that are taking up big capacity. Mental fatigue is something that will drain you to where it can impact your motivation. It can impact your ability to push your trading. I'm working out after I work. And so there's that mental capacity of work that is weighing on me when I go and train. And it's at the end of the day, that is a form of fatigue that will impact on that. So I think really the big thing for me is just focusing on lowering fatigue where I can in my weight training right now. And that's really what I'm looking at doing. That's why I'm doing lower volume overall, not going over like 10 reps very often. If I am, not doing those intensity techniques as well too, right? And then again, spending a more combination of just full range of motion training and not as much length and bias that as I had, say, a couple of months ago in my training there. But some other things, so that's one thing, right? My lifting volume is low. That's helped me continue to move forward in how I've managed that with a higher stress load on my body. And then again, managing intensity across the board of so also in the conditioning and cardio, right? Like not always just going balls to the wall, right? Like backing off where I need to there. And obviously my example of decreasing in my training session last night. Nutrition, though, is another thing that helps me manage all this and helps me recover, right? So having a good base of nutrition, whether that be through supplementation, right? Getting your bases that you're missing in your diet through supplementation, but then also having a good base of foods as well too, right? Getting some fruit and veggie in each day, eating whole foods, at least a good base, right? Getting that base is helpful there, right? Because again, we need those, we need we need certain nutrients. And if we're low on, that's obviously going to impact recovery. And when you have a higher stress load on your body, you do deplete nutrients a little bit faster, right? So this is where supplementation can come in, right? Using things like fish oil, magnesium glycinate can be super helpful, right? Eating enough protein, so that helps me recover. So making sure I get plenty of that. Matching my nutrition intake to my output, not always fat loss dieting, but then when I am fat loss dieting, making sure that I'm not just creating a huge deficit all the time when I'm also trying to push training. Fat loss is going to make that tough in general. Like that is going to add a stressor to the body. So ultimately not always fat loss dieting. And that's where, again, why I took that diet break there, right? So again, matching that nutrition to my recovery. And one way to do that is get to maintenance calories when you're fat loss dieting, when stress load on the body is high and you're feeling a little bit under recovered there. But those are things that have helped me from a nutrition perspective to help manage all this, to manage recovery. Sleep habits, generally, I am consistent with sleep to where I'm usually going to bed between 10 and 11, usually waking up between 5 and 6, right? That's pretty consistent. I can count on one hand in the last 6 months, me going to bed past 11 o'clock, right there. I'm much better with paying attention to my circadian rhythm and light dark. So trying to get sunlight as early as I can, turning off all overhead lights at night, wearing blue light blocking glasses for blocking blue light, but then also putting the nighttime thing on my phone, the night screen, and then same thing on my computer as well too. Trying to have a good wind down routine. I typically try to wind down, have that, read a book before bed, watch whatever it may be, like winding down and having that versus, hey, working all the way up till I go to sleep and then or working till I'm ready to go to bed and then go to sleep, right? Like having some sort of wind down routine there. But then also don't have any phone in the bed or anything like that. And I wear an eye mask as well too. And we keep the room nice and cool. So it's like setting up, having good sleep habits can be helpful. So while sleep hasn't been perfect, I've been going to bed a little bit later. I've probably had a little bit too much caffeine overall. It's like I'm still trying to do as much as I can to regulate my sleep habits. But then I talked about circadian rhythm. Also having good meal timing can be super helpful. So not trying to eat super close to bed has been super helpful as well too, and trying to push that gap as far as I can. I think, oh, and then sorry, so stress habits. So working on breath. So that's been one thing I've been huge on lately is working on breath, slowing down my breathing in general, more nasal breathing. I've always done my kind of 5 to 10 minute breath work meditation in the morning. So pairing that with that, but using meditation and breath work when I do feel like I'm starting to feel overwhelmed and just getting that time to just slow down and breathe. That really helps there. Trying to take as much time as I can to downregulate, getting outside, spending time with Allie and Colby. Like these are things that, again, maybe I'm not always great at those in terms of downregulating. I definitely feel like I could be better at it, but I still do try and fit that in versus just not ever thinking about it. Again, same thing with trying to turn my mind off. Again, easier said than done. I could still be way better at that, but I still practice at least a little bit of that. And that helps save me a little bit and gives me some buffer there from a recovery standpoint. As I said, overall, I've noticed in the past year, recovery has just been slightly lower. Again, just more stress in general. And from a mental aspect too, right? I feel like I'm doing a lot in terms of my business and content creation and things like that. But again, all these things do raise my capacity, right? So all the things I just mentioned, they help raise my capacity. When again, exercise is a good stressor, we need it. So it's finding the right dose and changing that around there. And as I said, motivation's key too, especially like I felt a little bit more under recovered in my training, but I also feel like the motivation is super important. Again, I'm not as focused on getting as big as possible anymore. And again, maybe not having that gym environment is something that sometimes can hurt motivation. And saying that, life happens and we don't want to be overly restrictive. So the goal isn't to avoid everything, but we have to know how to dial back and how we can raise our capacity. What are the low-hanging fruits, right? If you're consistently feeling under recovered, then we have to find what that is, right? And we need to look at what is the biggest ROI. So is it, we look at you, we do an audit and it's, hey, your circadian rhythm's all out of whack. That's a simple thing that you could do. Like you could do some small things throughout the day to help set you up to recover better, right? And the cool thing with that is if you can recover better, then you're going to be able to push your training more. You're going to be able to get in more high quality training. And when we can do that, we're going to be more likely to change our body composition and progress, right? It's going to help our performance, but also taking stress load off your body also helps you make better decisions. Motivation is going to be higher as well too. So again, is it your sleep habits? Is it your stress? Do we need to add in subs? And then there's just general things that are going to kill multiple birds with one stone. Best thing I can say here is like a walk outside after you eat. Like that's going to kill so many birds with one stone there, right? But again, this is the biggest issue I see with clients over 30 is instead of changing training, they either don't do it, right? So they stress load is high. And so they're like, stress is high. I'm just not going to train. I'm overwhelmed. I can't fit it in. So they don't do it, right? That's going to just make everything worse, even though training is a stressor, but we still want to do it. Or they just push through. And what happens when you do that, when you're under recovered and you have a lot of life stress and you're not managing those things, or at least having some things to lower it, you end up pushing yourself in your training. Everything feels harder. And so you feel like you're working super hard in your training, but you're actually not at where you need to be to adapt because you're just fatigued and you have a lot of fatigue masking that. And just, again, a lot of just you're under recovered. And so again, you feel like you're working hard, but you're not. And so then you continue to add this fatigue. You continue to be under recovered. You're not doing things to lower it. So everything continues to be more stressful. And it's just like this vicious cycle there. And so that's where people end up spinning their wheels. We need to make sure that we know how to manage things outside of the gym, but then also how do we manage our training? And then on the concept of pushing through, it can be good at times, but if you're under recovered, you're adding to that under recovery and making things worse. So you'll just spin your wheels despite that high perceived effort. We do want to push through. There's certain times where it's okay. Hey, can you let's take someone who isn't regular with training. They probably need to work on pushing through a bit more, but someone who always pushes through and is feeling under recovered, backing off a little bit or changing your training intensity could be something that you need. But again, this is exactly what I work on with clients inside the performance recomp method. We're going to push, but we also learn how to dial back when needed. And you're going to learn how to do this. You're going to learn how to listen to your body and what your body's telling you and what you need to do from a training perspective. Because again, if you just continue to push through and ignore it, or when things do get tough and you give up, again, both are going to lead to suboptimal results. Either way, how it shows up is again, is the person that, hey, anytime stress happens, they have other things going on. They stop training, they stop taking care of themselves. And then again, you have the other person that they just push through and now they're just continuing to add. You're just fueling that under recovery, and that's just going to continue to make things worse. And you're going to spin your wheels despite working hard, which in turn typically leads to injury, burnout, or giving up in the long run, right? And so either of them are not where we want to be with that. So I hope this was helpful. Deep dive into myself, but then also some practical applications of what you can do there. So let me know if you have any questions on this. If you haven't yet, give me a follow on Instagram, Jeff, HOEHN. _ that's where I'm most active on social media. You can ask me any questions on this. And then if you haven't yet, make sure you give a rating and review to the podcast so more people find this. That's it for now. I'll talk to you guys soon.